Today's experience was sent to us by a sister from Saudi Arabia. What she is about to share is an experience you will never want to miss. Kindly stay to the end to fully understand her experience. My name is Maryam Majid. I was born into a world where faith was everything. From the moment I could speak, I was taught the words of the Quran, and our daily lives revolved around prayers, fasting, and the traditions passed down through generations. My father was the pillar of our home, an imam, respected not just within our family but throughout our community. His deep knowledge of Islam and his devotion to the faith were unquestionable. He was strict but kind, always making sure that we understood the importance of our beliefs and duties as Muslims. My mother, on the other hand, was quieter about her faith but no less devoted. She rarely missed a prayer, and I often saw her sitting in the corner of the house with her prayer beads, whispering supplications. Growing up, I never questioned any of it. Islam wasn't just a religion. It was my identity, my culture, and my community. My parents made sure I understood that our faith was everything. It gave us purpose, structure, and a place in the world. It was all I had ever known, and I embraced it fully. I respected my father's knowledge and my mother's quiet devotion, and I believed that following their path was the only way to live a meaningful life. It was an ordinary afternoon when I first encountered something that would change the course of my life, though I didn't know it at the time. I was at the campus library, killing time between classes. I'd always been drawn to quiet places, and the library was my refuge whenever I needed to clear my mind. As I wandered through the aisles, my eyes fell on a small, worn book left on one of the tables. It was the Bible. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of why I felt drawn to it. I had never held a Bible before. There was no reason for me to, but something made me sit down, pick it up, and flip through the pages. It felt strange, almost forbidden. I grew up hearing that the Bible was a distorted text, and I had never been interested in learning about it. But there it was, right in front of me, and my curiosity got the best of me. I don't remember how long I sat there flipping through the pages, but at one point, my eyes landed on a verse in the book of Matthew. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Those words, simple yet profound, stopped me in my tracks. I read them again, slowly this time, trying to understand why they hit me so deeply. There was something about the way it was written, the tenderness of the invitation, that intrigued me. I didn't know much about Jesus beyond what I had been taught in Islam, that he was a prophet but not the Son of God. Yet here, in this moment, I found myself wondering about him in a way I never had before. I wasn't looking for answers that day, but something had been planted in my heart. It was the first time I had ever seriously thought about Jesus, and even though I tried to shake it off, I couldn't stop thinking about those words. Something in them spoke to me, even though I didn't fully understand why. Campus life was different from anything I had known growing up. For the first time, I was surrounded by people from all kinds of backgrounds and beliefs. My university was a melting pot of ideas. Students from various religions, and even those who didn't believe in any faith at all. We often had deep discussions, especially about life and spirituality. It wasn't uncommon to sit with friends after class and talk about what we believed, how we saw the world, and the different paths we were all on. I found myself gravitating towards these conversations, not because I was doubting my own faith, but because I was genuinely curious about how others lived and what they believed. I had friends who were Christians, Hindus, and even atheists. While I always defended my Islamic faith, I was also fascinated by how confident and joyful some of them seemed in their beliefs. One thing that stood out to me, especially about the Christian students, was this sense of peace they carried with them. It wasn't that they didn't face struggles. They did, just like everyone else. But there was a quiet joy about them, a kind of calm that I couldn't quite put my finger on. They spoke about their faith not in terms of rules or obligations, but as if they had a personal relationship with God. They talked about Jesus like he was a close friend, someone who loved them unconditionally. I had never heard anyone talk about God in that way before. It wasn't that I was envious. I loved my faith, and I had always found comfort in the rituals of Islam. But something about their peace made me curious. How could they be so sure? How could they find joy in their faith, even when life was hard? These questions lingered in my mind, though I rarely voiced them. Instead, I listened quietly during our discussions, absorbing everything, trying to understand how their experience of faith was so different from mine. The more time I spent with them, the more I began to notice this contrast. One evening, I decided to borrow a copy of the Bible from the campus library. I hid it under my jacket, feeling like I was doing something wrong, though I wasn't even sure why I felt that way. When I got back to my dorm room, I slipped the Bible under my bed, making sure it was well hidden. That night, when everyone else was asleep, I pulled it out and began reading. I told myself I was just trying to understand what Christians believed, nothing more. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Each night, I read a little more, always in secret, always making sure no one would catch me. I knew that if my family or friends found out, they would be devastated. I wasn't trying to convert. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was searching for something. The more I read, the more I felt this internal conflict growing. I was raised to believe that Islam was the only true path, but the words of Jesus stirred something inside me that I hadn't felt before. Some nights, I would close the Bible and try to pray in the way I had always known, but it felt different now. I felt torn between two worlds, the faith I had always known and this new pull towards something I didn't fully understand. I felt guilty, like I was betraying my family, my upbringing, and everything I had ever believed in. Yet, at the same time, I couldn't stop. The questions kept building, and with them, a sense of unease that wouldn't go away. One evening, as I sat on my bed, the room dimly lit by a small lamp, I opened the Bible to a verse I had read earlier that day. My heart was heavy with questions, still torn between the faith I had grown up with and this newfound curiosity about Jesus. I didn't know why I kept coming back to this verse, but it felt like it held something I was meant to understand. It was a verse from John. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I read it over and over, letting the words sink into my mind. I had been struggling so much, battling the guilt, the fear, the confusion, and I desperately wanted clarity. I closed my eyes, trying to make sense of everything, silently praying for guidance, though I wasn't even sure who I was praying to at that moment. Was it Allah? Was it the Jesus I had been reading about? I didn't know, but I was searching, yearning for some kind of answer. Suddenly, I felt it, a presence in the room, so strong that it was undeniable. My heart began to race, and I opened my eyes, looking around, but there was no one there. Yet, I could feel it. Something or someone was with me. It wasn't frightening, but the air was different, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. As I turned my gaze toward the wall by the window, I saw something impossible. There, stepping through the wall, not the door, was a figure. At first, my mind couldn't process what was happening, but as he came closer, I knew. It was Jesus. I had never seen him before, not like this, but deep inside, I knew it was him. His presence filled the room with a radiance that was beyond anything I could describe. There was a light that surrounded him, not harsh or blinding, but soft, warm, and full of love. The peace that flooded the room was overwhelming. It wasn't the kind of peace you get from silence or solitude. It was deeper, more complete, like everything in me that had been broken or confused was suddenly healed in an instant. His eyes, when they met mine, radiated pure love. It was the kind of love that sees you completely, every flaw, every doubt, every fear, and yet still holds you with a tenderness that you can't resist. I didn't move, I couldn't. I was frozen, not out of fear, but out of awe. Every part of me knew that this was the moment I had been searching for, though I hadn't known it until now. Jesus stood before me, and he didn't say much, but his words were everything. He simply looked at me, with that love that seemed to wrap around my very soul, and said, I love you, and I will always be by your side. In that moment, I didn't just hear the words, I felt them. It was like his love reached into the deepest parts of me, filling every void, every question, every fear. It wasn't the kind of love I had ever experienced before. It wasn't conditional or based on anything I had done or could ever do. It was perfect, all-encompassing, and eternal. In those few words, everything changed. The doubt, the guilt, the confusion, they all melted away. I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this was the truth I had been searching for. Jesus wasn't just a figure in history or a distant prophet. He was alive, real, and he loved me in a way that was beyond anything I could have imagined. He didn't say anything else. He simply turned and, just as he had entered, walked back through the wall. I sat there in silence, still feeling the warmth of his presence lingering in the room. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't fear. It was the realization that my life had just changed forever. In those few moments, everything became clear. I didn't need to question anymore. I didn't need to struggle or fight against the doubts. I had encountered Jesus, and his love was all the answer I needed. When I finally made the decision to follow Jesus, I knew it would come with a cost, but I could never have imagined just how high that cost would be. Telling my family was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I had prayed for courage, knowing that once I spoke the words, there would be no going back. I waited until we were all gathered together one evening, just after dinner. My father was reading the Quran as usual, and my mother was preparing tea. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat there, trying to find the words. How could I tell them that I was no longer the person they thought I was? That I had embraced something they would see as betrayal? When I told them, I've become a Christian, for a moment there was silence. The reaction was immediate. My father stood up, his face contorted with rage. He shouted, calling me ungrateful, accusing me of betraying everything he had ever taught me. My mother wept, her hands covering her face as though she couldn't bear to look at me. The room felt like it was collapsing around me, their anger and heartbreak suffocating. I tried to explain, to tell them about my encounter with Jesus, about the love and peace I had found, but they didn't want to hear it. Neighbors who had once greeted me warmly now turned their backs. I received cold stares, and some even whispered insults as I walked by. But the hardest part was my father's ultimatum. He gave me one last chance, his face stern and eyes full of hurt. Come back to Islam or leave this house forever. You are not my daughter if you choose this path. His voice was final, his decision absolute. My heart broke in that moment because I knew what I had to do. After the confrontation with my family, I left home with nothing but a small suitcase and a heart full of uncertainty. Thankfully, I wasn't alone. Sarah, my quiet, steadfast friend, was there when I needed her most. When I told her what had happened, she didn't hesitate. You can stay with me, she said, without a moment's doubt. I had never seen such kindness, such unconditional love. It was as if I had found a new family in her, a sisterhood that wasn't bound by blood but by faith. Joining a Christian community was another step I wasn't sure I was ready for, but Sarah encouraged me to come to her church. The people there didn't know my story, and I didn't offer it right away, but they welcomed me with open arms. They were kind, patient, and understanding, allowing me to ask questions and find my way. I still missed my family, and the pain of their rejection lingered in my heart. All right, friends, this brings us to end of today's experience. Kindly like and share this video with your friends and families. Kindly subscribe to our channel and turn on your notification bell icon to be the first to get updated anytime we upload a new experience sent to us. Remain blessed.